Well, today's food holiday opened up a world of possibilities, but I decided to focus on the flavors of fall. Here's this week's Brittany's Bites. Today is World Bread Day. Yep, World Bread Day, not just a national holiday. So I have to celebrate this food holiday. And I decided, what can I make? Obviously, endless possibilities. But I thought, let's go with some of the fall flavors we're all thinking about right now. I really was going back and forth between something apple and something pumpkin. And I thought, well, why not put it all together? So today we are making pumpkin apple cider bread, or apple cider pumpkin bread. Hadn't figured out which way I want to call it, but you get the drift. Okay, so I got things started a little bit. Dry ingredients in one bowl here, just using this as my bowl to mix things in, and got wet ingredients here. So we're gonna add some more to this. We've got flour and sugar and baking soda and baking powder in here. I will put all of the exact measurements online, a lot to remember here. And then to this, we're gonna add some of those spices we're talking about. And what are you thinking about when you think about spices during the fall? Cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, right? So we're gonna put all of those in here. So I'll get my ½ teaspoon in here. That's a heaping teaspoon, but I love cinnamon, why not? I'm gonna get my nutmeg and then put in a ⁻4 teaspoon of the cloves. And then I'm just gonna sift this. It just makes everything so much smoother when you get it into a baking of any sort, a cake, a bread, cupcakes, whatever. So it might get a little messy here, so I'm gonna take care of this and then we'll move on to the second part. Okay, we have everything sifted when it comes to our dry ingredients. So now we're gonna move on to the wet ingredients quickly. We've got 1 can of pumpkin puree in here, not the pumpkin pie mix, pumpkin puree. We're getting all of the spices and other things that you would have in a pumpkin pie mix already in here, so you don't wanna do that. Pumpkin puree. And to that, we're gonna add 2 eggs. And then we're gonna add in some of the apple cider. Now you could absolutely use water because we're gonna add some apples here. You'll still get the apple flavor, but it's that time of year. I wanna make sure actually, I shake this up a little bit. We're gonna do a ½ cup of apple cider. You could do apple juice as well, or you could just do water. It is totally fine. All right, got about a ½ cup there. Pour this right in. And then we're gonna do a ⅓ cup of vegetable oil. You know what else you could do if you wanna lighten it up a little bit as well? You could substitute applesauce for your oil. I believe, I don't know if this is really true. I think you can test it out, but I've heard you should never substitute applesauce more than a ⁻4 cup. So say it calls for a ½ cup of oil. You could do a ⁻4 cup applesauce, a ⁻4 cup oil, but you can test it out. It works okay in some recipes, better than others. So I've got a ⅓ cup of oil here. And I'm just gonna mix this all together, and then we're gonna combine our wet and dry ingredients. So I'll just get this mixed up, and then we'll put everything together and add some of our toppings here. Well, toppings that are gonna go inside. Okay, we've got this all nice and smooth now. Everything in here smells so great. It's just like fall in my house right now. All right, we're gonna combine these. So again, we've got our pumpkin mix here with our apple cider and our oil and to our flour and sugar and all of those spices. I'm gonna mix this together and then we're gonna add our apples. And speaking of apples, really when it comes to baking, the green Granny Smith apples are just the best when it comes to baking. And so I want about a cup. It's a heaping cup, by the way, and it depends on how big your apples are. So I have sort of medium apples, and that ended up being about an apple and a half, and I really wanted to use the full half of the apple and not let it go to waste, so I went ahead and maybe did a heaping cup. All right, this is almost mixed up, and then I'm gonna add in some nuts as well. Okay, I think we're all mixed up here. Now, we wanna fold in those apples I was talking about. So this is about a cup, a really big heaping cup, and I've peeled them and diced them really fine. And then again, that ¾ cup of chopped walnuts I'm gonna put in. Once we mix this up, we're all good to go. This is another one of those recipes that comes together very, very quickly, but does require some prep work. That's why I did it before we got started here. It does take a while to peel and chop up those apples and to dice up or chop up the nuts as well. But here we go. Here is our final version of the batter that we're gonna put into our baking dish. And I just have a loaf dish here that I have definitely sprayed down with cooking spray for sure. And I'm just gonna pour it in there. And then the oven is preheating at 325 degrees. And that is a nice low and slow baking temperature. So once I put this in the oven, it's gonna be in there for at least an hour and a half, if not longer, maybe an hour and 45. Now we're gonna pour it in. Oh, I love those chunky apples and the walnuts. This fit in perfectly. All right, spread out the top, and then I'm gonna pop it in the oven, like I said, for at least an hour and a half, so you can make dinner and eat dinner by the time this is done baking in the oven. Our bread is now out of the oven and cooled, and look how gorgeous it looks. It came right out of the pan, thankfully, and I did have it in the oven at 325 for about an hour and 45 minutes, almost pressing the 2-hour mark. So this does take a long time to bake, but it's nice and fluffy and springy, and it smells amazing. You could absolutely leave it just like this, but I'm just gonna get a little dusting of powdered sugar just because it's pretty. Of course, it'll add just a tiny little bit of sweetness too, but I'm not gonna overdo it. So I'm just gonna get a little scoop in my tiny little strainer here, and then just sprinkle it over the top like that. I kind of like getting it everywhere. There we have the finished product. This is our apple cider pumpkin cake, or pumpkin apple cider bread, loaf, whatever you want to call it. It's basically fall in a bite. I hope you try it. Here we go. Cheers. Well, if you have a picture to share of one of my recipes you've made or an idea for a future segment, you can always text us at 614-460-3345 or find me on social media.